Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. Today, I have a friend and colleague, Lalita Uppala, who I have known for a very long time, and she's doing some incredible work leading the Indian American Community Services, which is a organization that supports and promotes all sorts of services for the Indian American community. But she has, like so many of us, multiple disciplines in which we have spent our lives in. In biomedical engineering, she is a scientist and has been in that space before leading this organization. So please join me in welcoming Lalita.
Thank you, Akhtar. Happy to be here and share some thoughts with you.
Yeah, so tell us about your story. Born, what were you doing? How did you come here? Your technical expertise, and now in this world of community service.
Well, if we believe in chance happenings, I'm a chance happening. Third child to physician parents who always believed in service and in purpose. My father, he was a physician, and so was my mom. And I grew up in central India to southern Indian parents. If anyone knew how to merge cultures, it was definitely there in my family, because we lived with our Sikh neighbors, our Muslim neighbors, our Hindu neighbors. We ate with the patients who walked into my dad's free clinic every day. That was the life I grew up in. Bhopal gas tragedy of Union Carbide, walking with my parents to see what's happening in those camps, treating patients, and over the years, struggling the guilt of maybe not having met my parents' expectations, trying as much as I want to try to get into med school and being one seat away from on the wait list to getting into med school with deep disappointment and frustration, moving into microbiology and molecular biology, and then coming to the US to do my master's in molecular biology in Wisconsin, getting married and meeting my husband here in the Pacific Northwest, transferring to the University of Washington School of Public Health. I did my master's in environmental health and human health toxicology, joined a startup to provide expert witnessing and scientific support for tort litigation, going through representing the corporate health sector in tort litigation around implants and Xanax and environmental tobacco smoke. And through that, still struggling with why am I not meeting my expectations or my dad's expectations of who I am, working as a consultant, but walking through the journey of raising my children and asking some hard questions within my own community about equity and inclusivity, especially when I would send my children to the summer camp that India Association of Western Washington, as it was known in those days. And when I brought in, yard-long sheet of complaints to the organization as a parent saying, I don't approve of this, and I don't agree with your value systems in this, to being asked to come and make the change as a volunteer.
Just stop there for a second, because I want to kind of go back to Bhopal. Because I think there are very few people that, at least I know, were actually there when one of the most horrific environmental disasters on this planet happened. So for our listeners, Bhopal, a major city in central India, had a Union Carbide plant that leaked gas, and over 20,000 people died and millions of people were impacted. And you are actually talking about walking the streets with your parents to treat patients at that time?
So my parents being physicians, and we were not from Bhopal, we were from another smaller town called Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh in central India. At that time, there was a call out from the government for volunteer physicians from all across the state to come in because there were so many tens of thousands of people who were struggling with infections to the eye, getting blinded, having other health effects. And there were these camps that the government had set up. And I remember my parents volunteering to participate in those as volunteer positions and taking me along with them. And what I saw in front of that, the sea of humanity that was struggling with the lack of healthcare, lack of medication. It was just devastation that was so stark that it just stood in my mind as who my parents were, where I was from, and what a responsibility you carry as an individual in humanity.
So that to me is just probably something that stays with you for all your life.
It does.
So thank you. I mean, I just want to kind of get a little deeper into it. So you are complainer-in-chief in an organization that is also run by largely volunteers, right?
Right.
They're basically providing services to the community, which includes a summer camp for young people and elderly services and other kinds of services. So talk about that experience.
I'm not the title complainer-in-chief because I think I'm that in most facets of, or most tables that I sit on. But I think also when I was invited to step in and put some volunteering hours and put my thoughts into how we want to change this program, if we have thoughts about changing it or co-create it rather. I wouldn't even say change, but bring co-creation in with our community youth. I did at that point dig in my heels, along with complainer-in-chief, also a good work body. Started doing that work at that time and transitioned from a volunteer to the program director for the IACS youth program and started hearing thoughts from our community youth and how they wanted the program to transition. Well, 25 years of that youth program, and I reached out to our community's families saying we would like to celebrate this 25th anniversary of Camp Bharat, as it was known. And at that point, I had transitioned from complainer-in-chief to volunteer to youth program director to the president of the organization over time. And fortunately for me, 15 amazing women from this community who were mothers to youth who had attended this summer camp over the years and who had seen the kind of impact that this summer camp makes in their children's lives, the relationships and the community, the extended family that this summer camp gave their children, reached back out to me and said, we would love to do something together. And we organized a huge celebration with our community's youth, our alum. And at that point, my question to them was, what else can we do for you? And it came right back at us and said, it is time you did something for yourselves. It is time that you put authenticity in the platform. It is time you address the patriarchy, the classism, the classism that seems to plague our community. And it is time to build bridges that are cross-cultural and collaborative. And it is time for India Association of Western Washington to now go through the evolution it needs to meet the people where they are, to meet community where we are. And that's when I reached out to these same 15 women saying, would you like to help me in stepping up and adding more programs and services, meeting our community with focus groups, adding staffing? And that's the evolutionary role that from where we went from India Association of Western Washington to Indian American Community Services with funding that 15 families put forward in this organization to then evolve into a support services organization that would address basic, urgent, and emergent needs of our community. And we transitioned into Indian American Community Services. While I say that, that transition was not as easy to transition into. Anytime something that works well is questioned, there is pushback. And there was pushback. And we didn't meet that pushback. What was amazing was our youth and the women in our community, our seniors, everybody stepped forward to meet that challenge. And we did agree as a community to transition and change the role, the mission, the vision, and the value systems for India Association of Western Washington to then become Indian American Community Services, because we wanted to be that bridge where when systems fall short, we wanted to connect our people to resources. When mainstream services didn't understand our language or our culture or our lived experiences, right? We wanted to be the platform as a place for dignity for our seniors.
There was a very important point that you made, which, of course, I made it jest, but you kind of added something very decisive to it. One can complain, and the act of complaining, if it is just for complaining, leads to nothing. But if an act of complaining is to actually create and drive action and change, then you have to move from just being a complainer to actually a doer. And I think that is very critical for all of us to understand. And I think what Lalita has shown is this constant ability to not just find gaps that need to be addressed, but to actually take action to coalesce people around it. And one thing that was very clear with what she has just highlighted, that it was not her alone that was able to do this, but she actually brought the community together. And the community included people that had been serviced and then people that wanted to be part of this journey. So in some ways, how do we actually even create a small movement that allows us to do that? So I just want to kind of reflect on that. Let me just frame it with a question. We have this community, the Indian American community, one of the wealthiest communities in this country, probably also has a very high level of education in this community. So why are there so many challenges? I mean, why does this need to be addressed for the community and not for the community to do something for others?
So I'm going to bring back a conversation on model minority males. Is the Indian immigrant refugee community a model minority? Absolutely not. Yes, we have a percentage of community among us who are educated, who have privilege of having worked in the Boeings, the Microsofts, the Amazons, in running successful businesses, in being in academia. We have the privilege of raising children who can go to college without worrying about paying off their loans. Yes, we have that privilege. But along with that, we have a significant percentage of workers in our community who struggle to make ends meet. These are our restaurant workers, our beauty salon workers, our cab drivers. We also have an H-1 visa community that comes in to work as temp workers to companies as subcontractors, and they don't get paid the wages that a typical tech worker in an industry would get paid. They are oftentimes they're working in sweatshops. There are situations where you will see that tech workers can't even make rents in their apartment communities because cost of living in the Northwest is much higher. You have to pay your immigration fee. You have to pay back the contractor or the company that brought you to this country. There are multiple reasons why, but along with our workers, our H-1 visa and the dependent visa workers in our community, as well as women in our community who come in not having the ability to work because they don't have a work permit, because they are dependent on spouses for income just because they don't have a work permit. These are situations where that model minority doesn't often happen. The other part to it is the significant epidemic of mental health issues that impact our community. And we all know mental health knows no income bounds. There are no privileges to mental health. 7 out of 10 young adults that we send out from our community to the workplaces come back non-functional, come back with anxiety and stress, depression, low self-worth. There is domestic violence that is rampant in our community. There is a level of patriarchy that we constantly seem to address. There is a stigma around accessing resources to improve mental wellness, to address mental wellness, to understand and gender affiliations, to understand when your child is a member of the LGBTQ community, what are the next steps to take. There is a plethora of struggles that our community goes through, in addition to knowing that this journey of immigration comes with trauma anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I wanted the listeners to understand what actually happens within what might be seen otherwise as a model immigrant community. There are no model immigrant communities. Every community has its own challenges, but it's not just challenges that you're addressing, right? I mean, you created the youth program, but it's also about fostering community. The elderly program. So can you talk just a little bit about how the work that you're doing is actually fostering community, and it is inclusive of not just the Indian Americans, but the larger community?
I think bringing back what Vivek Murthy mentioned, right? The epidemic of loneliness in this country, in the cultures that we have. We are so mired in our work scopes, in our education, that loneliness is so rampant within every family. And oftentimes for us at Indian American Community Services, what we've heard from seniors and our elders in the community were they were trapped in their homes due to lack of public transportation from suburbia to meeting places where they could connect with each other. Having established pop-up community centers across East and North King County, what we saw was you could pull together without structured space. You could collaborate with your local cities to set up pop-up centers. You could create that semblance of community and connections by bringing together your community for programming or lunches or cross-cultural events. And as long as you had that on a recurring basis, your community shows up because they want to address that loneliness that sits so deep in our hearts that we want to reach out and connect with each other. We want to sit and have a cup of tea with friends. We want to have a meal with families that are from our community or across other communities. So in addition to creating these pop-up spaces, IACS also has really taken to heart what we put out during Black Lives Matter as what are the reparations that we are working to address? How are we addressing systemic racism? How are we addressing bridge building? Why is it important for us to build those cross-cultural bridges as certain privileged communities in the immigrant communities that live in King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties? Part of that work is building those partnerships with our partners across communities to come up with an international coalition, a cross-cultural coalition, particularly in East Side. When we look at East King County, there is no international district here.
Yeah.
But instead, can we as community organizations across communities come up with a coalition that can own space and provide that kind of marketplace, the community gathering space that can cross cultural barriers, that can build relationships and not other each other, but rather where we can hold hands together and we can become partners in this larger thriving community, where we can open doors and plant those seeds of belonging, where our roots will anchor us, but our branches have to shelter our generations that have yet to come. That is a very important role that we as an organization have taken on in cross-cultural partnerships to build spaces, to own spaces, which will talk about cross-cultural partnerships, which will talk about welcoming all cultures, where there is an inclusion and equity in the kind of work we do, where there is stepping back to include everybody, not just ourselves.
No, that's so well put. I'm so fortunate to actually be in the community where we have these services. Probably I should, now that I'm also a senior citizen, start showing up for these events.
Always welcome.
So I know that we are going to run out of our time, but let's just talk a little bit about the importance of purpose and why purpose has been so central to your journey.
I'll go back to, did I meet my expectations? meet my parents' expectations of who I am. And I'll say that having raised a family here, I feel so fortunate that I did not get into med school.
Yeah.
I am fortunate that in the biotech field, I did not feel like I belonged. I'm fortunate that I was chief complaining officer for IACS at some time because it gave me this purpose. It fills my soul where I know that every Monday is welcome, not as a blue Monday, but as a glorious Sunday. To me, when I'm out working with community and when I'm out building partnerships and serving those needs that are basic, that are much needed and are urgent, I belong. I belong to this soil and I belong to this humanity.
When I talk to people, people come up with very interesting analogies about what purpose means to them. And for you, it is about rootedness. It is about belonging to the soil. You actually talked about IACS is actually almost, you described it as a tree, which is not only providing deep roots, but it's also providing shelter with our branches and a canopy, and it also a place for protection. And it's not just for humans to enjoy. A tree services insects, a tree services birds, a tree services animals, a tree services, different kinds of things grow on top of a tree. So in some ways for you, purpose is that rootedness. So it's such a great analogy. So thank you very much for that. And I hope our listeners can take some of that insight. So let's end with your one golden nugget and, piece of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners.
I would say to me, my golden nugget is who are those individuals in community that I gather closest to me who can be my mirrors to point out to me when I make a misstep. I found those two people for me. And find those people for you, those golden nuggets for you who can truly call out when you veer from your vision, when you veer from finding your North Star, because those are your golden nuggets that will guide you constantly. And that life and journey in purpose is about the experience of it. It's about making errors and rectifying them and learning from them and finding your golden nuggets who can guide you through them.
It's such a wonderful way to end. Find the people that you can surround yourself with, which can help you explore your rootedness. So with that, Lalita, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Again, to our listeners, thank you for listening. Purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. Find your rootedness, find your purpose. Lalita, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Akhtar.